Chow.
Healthy chewing habits by providing your dog with a variety of chew toys.
What else you want to do before we start?
Hold on. Dog situation.
Dog situation.
Pup situation. Just a second, please.
Okay. Because I had thought that was actually going to be our lead-in. Instead, we're just waiting here for Bryan Chaffin. He's the managing editor of the Mac Observer. No, he's not. He's the editor-in-chief. But I can say that right now because he's not even listening. I can be all like, yeah, he just started last week at the Mac Observer. He's actually one of the co-founders. We learned that from Dave Hamilton, when Dave Hamilton was on this show. He told us.
I did Dave Hamilton.
That Bryan Chaffin was one of the co-founders. Oh, you're back.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was telling people who you were and why you were here while you were gone. So
the show started while I was gone?
What? No, the show started while you were here. The show started, and I said, anything else you want to do? And you're like, oh, hang on one second. And you went away. But at that point, man, cameras are rolling, except we don't do video anymore. Lots happened since the last time you were on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we had Dave Hamilton on. He told us all sorts of inside secrets about Bryan Chaffin.
Yes.
Who is not the managing editor of the Mac Observer. Oh, no. He is the editor-in-chief. You see, that was one of the things. I'm really looking forward to you hearing the first minute of this show once it's out, because we spent a lot of time talking about you while you were gone.
Huh.
Yeah. So here's something interesting, I think. As you and I record Sunday, the 4th of October, it was 9 years ago today that Siri made its way to the iPhone when Apple CEO Tim Cook, still with that new CEO smell, got up on stage at that tiny little theater, I think, over at Infinite Loop. I believe that's where it was. And introduced Siri, which is funny because everybody's like, oh, Apple invented this thing. And I had actually talked to the Siri developers, I want to say the year before that at Macworld, before Apple did whatever deal it did to get Siri. Siri was a thing beforehand, but whatever. And so that was, as you and I record, 9 years ago today. And that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is... But
Apple had bought Siri before that.
Right. Yes, but it hadn't been on... It got introduced with iPhone 4S.
Correct.
The S, they said, stood for Siri.
But who thought that Apple had invented it? We knew that Apple had bought it.
Oh, please. If you ask people now, sure, because you're a guy who follows Apple News, and I was a guy that followed Apple News. If you go out on the street and ask people, I feel certain that they will say that Apple invented Siri. Neither of which is here or there.
But that doesn't count. I mean, like, no one that's listening to the show.
What?
No one that's listening to the show thought that.
Well, I don't know.
Because the people who listen to the show follow Apple News, too.
Well, they do now. Did they necessarily 9 years ago? I mean, I'm assuming that people are coming and going. Look, all that's aside, it was really just an interesting, like, we're talking on the day that happened. You may remember, I feel certain you do, they kept cutting to an empty chair at that event. That empty chair, of course, should have been Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, who was still chairman, I think, of Apple, but had retired about a month and a half before as CEO because it turns out his illness was not progressing in the direction that people would like. As people hear this, it was 9 years ago today that we heard that Steve Jobs had passed away. Yeah. It was after the market closed. I want to say it was actually in the evening, because I know that I was already getting ready for macOS Cannes Live. And then, of course, that was on a Wednesday night. And then news came that Steve Jobs had passed away, which completely blew out the show. And who cares? It was very interesting, very cathartic kind of, basically inviting both people I knew who would have something to say, and then also just opening the phones and let people call in and talk. I'm curious what your memories are of the man. I was in the room twice at two of his events. You're sort of in that area, and you've been, I don't know, in this business longer. How many times were you present for events? Did you meet him? What are your Steve Jobs thoughts?
Never shook his hand. Closest I got to him was when he and Bob Iger were announcing a deal with Disney.
I was there for that.
For Apple, and I got this great. It's one of the best photographs I took. I held my camera up, my DSLR up, and just pointed it down, not seeing where I was shooting, and just fired as many pictures as I could. And
that was the San Jose event, right? That was the one where they introduced the new video iPod about 3 weeks after saying who would want to watch a video on something that small. And they said they had like Pixar shorts and music videos, and I want to say 4 shows from ABC.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They also introduced a new iMac G5 that day, which is weird to me because a couple of months earlier they had said we're moving to Intel.
Right.
All right. So you were there for that one.
Yeah, I was there for that. I saw a whole lot of Steve Notes. That was when Apple was still inviting me to these things. I was at the theater a couple of times, the California theater.
Okay.
So that was those were great events. Saw multiple Steve Notes in San Francisco, and then also Macworld, the last Macworld Boston, and then Macworld New York.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I saw him lots of times. I haven't counted. I would assume it was in excess of 20 or maybe 30, because there were events in between Macworlds.
See, what's weird is I was trying to count earlier, and I had actually conflated the video iPod one with another time that I saw him. Because it turns out I saw him like 2 months apart. There was the 1 or 3 months apart. I guess maybe 4, because the new iPod thing was in October of 2005. I don't remember when they made the announcement to Intel. That was Macworld, so it was June or July of 2005 as well. Because they announced that they were going over to Intel, and they also announced podcasts were coming to iTunes, I believe, in the same at the same event. And that was it. That was it for me. Everything else I watched on video or watched streams of or something like that. One time I watched it. We actually broadcast a stream of his keynote from 2000 at ZDNet, and boy, did we get in trouble.
Yeah. I kind of remember that.
Yeah, because nobody told us we couldn't. It wasn't even on TV. It was just on ZDTV radio. It was ZDTV radio, but nobody told us that we couldn't do it. I mean, we actually thought that we were supposed to, so we did. And the next day we all got called in. Because it turns out, yeah, not so much. So what's I don't know what to ask exactly. I don't want to ask about Apple since as Steve Jobs, because we're going to talk about that in a moment. But
well, all right. Let me throw you in a fun direction, which you may not be aware of. Are you know of our Apple death knell counter?
Yeah. Dave Hamilton was talking about that a while ago when everything started with beleaguered, or when everything started with
Yes.
Circling the drain or what have you.
Well, the last entry is only from a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Which is just fascinating to me. But whatever. I have an entry. Bryan Chaffin has an entry in the Apple death knell counter where I said that Steve Jobs should, go away, and he had done enough of saving Apple.
Okay.
I was pissy about CyberDog, OpenDoc and CyberDog, and that platform being shut down.
Okay.
I was like super cranky about it. And so I wrote this piece about, it's a terrible idea. And, Steve Jobs is wrong, and this is fantastic technology. And I know I prefaced this sentence, but I said something. I said specifically, he's done enough saving of Apple. And then I said I don't know, you should go back to Next, or I don't know.
Oh, wow.
What else I said.
All right. Hey, I forgot the thing that I forgot to mention to people, by the way, as we came in, and we should do this for legal purposes, for legal reasons, even though we're not talking about the future of Apple right now. You own like 9 shares of Apple. I'm kidding about 9 shares, but you own a tiny bit of Apple stock. Is that correct?
I own a very small stake in Apple.
All right.
It has never influenced anything that I had to say about Apple. It never will influence anything I have to say about Apple.
Get used to hearing that, because we're going to be saying that for every episode this week. So, yeah. There was one other thing. So I had cable when Steve Jobs passed away. And I think I was watching MSNBC, because I did, like, pretty much all the time at that point. Like, if they could have sold me just one channel, I would have been fine. Maybe that and HBO. And that night when Steve Jobs died, Lawrence O'Donnell called a friend of his, apparently, who he thought could speak knowledgeably about the passing of Steve Jobs. It was Rob Enderle.
Oh my God!
I know, right? Me? No, I'm not kidding you. And here's the thing.
Wrong again, Enderle.
And here's the thing. I mean, Rob Enderle was nothing but kind and gracious about everything there, and had nothing but good things to say about Steve Jobs. And then Lawrence O'Donnell asked, "Is this it for Apple?" And of course, Enderle said yes. But of course, Enderle was always saying, "This is it for Apple."
Yeah, he's constantly. He's got multiple entries in the death knell counter. Did you ever read? He and I did a back and forth.
No.
Did you happen to read that?
No.
Yeah. So he was way more gracious than me.
Okay.
You know, I spent a lot of time insulting him.
Sure.
And criticizing him.
Yeah.
And because it's just infuriated me how wrong he was.
Yeah.
And he agreed to do a back and forth that was put together by a friend who launched a new tech site, but for corporate overlords.
Okay.
And she put it together because she it's not that she liked him. Anyway, she put it together, and she got him to agree and me to agree that, you know, he would write something, I would respond. He would write something, I would respond. And it was a 6-part back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And his one stipulation is that I didn't do any ad hominem attacks, which he was right. Like I said, he was always way more gracious than me, but he's just wrong. He's just wrong. I also knew some people at HP PR. Mm-hmm. They loved him because he would always say stuff that their bosses liked.
You know, he
right.
Almost...
So that's why he made money, is that he was saying things that people in the tech world, executives in the tech world, wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But he was always wrong about Apple. Always wrong.
Yeah. Well, almost always wrong. I remember there was one time that I actually, when I was still working for Inside Mac, I did some story that he did, and I thought it was insightful. And Scott Shepard was like, why are you talking about Enderle? And I was like, well, listen to what he said. Because what he said in this one article was actually, it was true. And I don't remember what it was because it was too long ago. And I remember thinking it was weird, actually, that Scott was so against him. But while I had written tech news before, I hadn't written specifically for Apple, or not for Apple, but specifically about Apple. I came to understand relatively quickly why it was that Scott thought it was ridiculous that I was saying Rob Enderle's name. Not with reverence, but with, you know, just like taking it seriously. But that's the thing. I mean, you can't blame Rob Enderle for being wrong. You have to blame everybody else for listening to him continually.
Yeah. Well, there were two buttons he pushed in the Apple world. One was, of course, that was still when the whole Apple community, the Mac web, as it were, mm-hmm. was very focused on rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
Right. And he was criticizing our underdog and saying that our underdog was doomed. But then the other thing was the fact he was always wrong.
Well, there is that too.
You found an example of him being right.
Well, yeah. No, I'm not.
He was always wrong.
Oh, please. There are plenty of times. Yes, he's absolutely 9 times out of 10. But we weren't talking about Enderle. We were talking about
99 times out of 100.
But
the guy was always wrong.
But we weren't talking about Enderle. We were talking about Jobs. We're about to wrap up. Is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to throw in?
Was amazing. Steve Jobs' gift to the world was seeing the stuff that the rest of us didn't see and didn't know we cared about. And Apple, without Steve Jobs, is changed. Some for the better, some for the worse, and some just different. And I miss that aspect of what he brought. Like, you know, there was all the stuff about him being able to get people to do things that they didn't know that they could do. Amazing and wonderful. His vision about seeing things, you know, seeing where we were going, or seeing where he wanted to take us, etc. Those things were great too. But his gift of seeing the details that the rest of us missed was a true gift to the rest of the world, and I absolutely positively missed that.